Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to Kiddies World with Makky. Today, I want to tell you a very special story, the story of Good Friday. Now, parts of this story might sound a little bit sad, but stay with me, because it teaches us about the greatest love the world has ever known. The love Jesus has for every single one of us. Our journey starts a long, long time ago in a quiet village called Nazareth. It was a place of dusty roads and golden sunshine. In this little town lived a young woman named Mary. She was kind and humble, and she loved God with all her heart. She had no idea that a miracle was about to knock on her door. One evening, while the world was falling asleep, a light brighter than any lamp filled Mary's room. It wasn't a candle or a torch. It was a glow from heaven itself. Mary looked up, her heart full of wonder, as a magnificent figure appeared before her. It was the angel Gabriel, sent with a secret message just for her. Gabriel stood there with wings like starlight, telling Mary not to be afraid. He told her,
"Greetings, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will have a son."
2 months later, Mary and her husband Joseph had to take a very long walk to a town called Bethlehem. Mary rode slowly on a little donkey, tired from the bumpy road, but Joseph stayed right by her side. They were looking for a place to rest, but every door was closed. There was no room for them anywhere in the busy town. But high above them, God was lighting a path. A star, larger and brighter than any other, began to pulse in the velvet sky. It was like a giant diamond in the night, announcing to the whole world that the king was coming. Far across the desert, wise men looked up in awe and began their own mission to follow that beautiful light. The 3 kings rode their camels across the shifting sands, their eyes fixed on that heavenly glow. They knew the star.
"Look, the star is pulsing faster. We are almost there,
Mary
my friends."
and Joseph found a warm, humble stable. It smelled like sweet hay and quiet peace. And there, in the middle of the night, the Savior of the world was born. There was no golden bed, only a wooden manger filled with straw. Mary wrapped her tiny baby in soft cloths.
"Welcome to the world, little king. We've been waiting for
Mission
you."
of love. The wise men arrived soon after, guided by the star to the stable door. They knelt down on the hay, humbled to see the baby king. They opened their heavy chests and gave him treasures of gold and sweet-smelling perfumes to show how much they honored him. Even the most powerful men on earth.
"We bring gold for a king, and myrrh for
Up
the
in
Savior
Nazareth,
of the world."
working with Joseph in the carpenter's shop. He was a boy full of wisdom and kindness, always helping others. He was getting strong, because he knew that soon, he would begin a journey that would change everything, a journey of miracles, and eventually, the story of Good Friday. He worked with his hands, but in his heart, he was preparing to build a bridge of love between heaven and us. This was just the beginning. After Jesus grew up, he began to travel and show everyone how much God loved them. One morning, by the big blue sea of Galilee, he met a fisherman named Peter. Peter was very tired because he had been fishing all night long. But his nets were completely empty. Not even one tiny fish. Jesus smiled and told him, "Peter, row your boat out deep and drop your nets one more time." Peter was confused, but he obeyed. And suddenly, the water began to boil with life. Thousands of silver fish jumped into the net. There were so many that the boat began to sink. Peter fell to his knees in wonder. He realized that with Jesus, there is always more than enough. As Jesus walked through the busy, dusty streets of the villages, people would crowd around just to see him. One day, he saw a man sitting by the side of the road who had been blind since he was a little boy. He lived in a world of shadows and darkness. But Jesus didn't just walk past him. He stopped. He knelt down in the dust and looked at the man with eyes full of kindness. With one gentle touch of his fingers, a golden light filled the man's eyes. For the first time in his life, he saw the colors of the flowers, the faces of his friends, and the bright, warm sun. Jesus had brought light into his darkness. Late one night, a terrifying storm caught the disciples in their little boat. The wind was howling like a wolf, and the waves were crashing over the side. They were so scared, crying out for help in the dark. But then, they saw something impossible. A figure was moving across the top of the giant waves. It wasn't a ghost. It was Jesus. He walked on the deep, blue water as if it were a smooth garden path. Every step he took sent ripples of peace across the ocean. He showed them that even when the storms of life are big, he is always bigger. One afternoon, a massive crowd of 5,000 people sat on a green hillside to listen to Jesus. The sun was going down, and everyone was getting very, very hungry. But the only food they could find was a little boy's lunch. Just 5 small loaves of bread and 2 tiny fish. How could that feed so many? Jesus took the small basket, looked up to the clouds, and gave thanks. And a miracle happened. The bread began to grow and grow, overflowing from the basket. Everyone ate until they were full, and they even had 12 baskets of leftovers. It was a giant picnic of God's love. Even the weather had to listen to Jesus. Once, while he was sleeping in a boat, a hurricane blew in. The disciples woke him up, screaming, "Master, don't you care if we drown?" Jesus stood up at the front of the boat, perfectly calm. He looked at the raging wind and the lightning and simply said, "Peace, be still." In a heartbeat, the wind stopped. The rain vanished. The sea became as still as a mirror, reflecting a beautiful, quiet sunset. The disciples whispered to each other, "Who is this man, that even the wind and the waves obey him?" After all the beautiful miracles, the healing of the blind, the feeding of the hungry, and the calming of the storms, you would think everyone would love Jesus, right? But some people were jealous. They didn't understand his heart of gold. On a quiet Thursday night, while the candles flickered in an upper room, Jesus sat with his friends for one last dinner. He looked at them with eyes full of stars and said, "I have to go away for a little while, but I am leaving my love with you." He broke the bread, and even though he knew what was coming, he was still thinking about us. He was preparing his heart to be the ultimate hero. Even at the dinner table, with the warm bread and glowing candles, a shadow was creeping in. Jesus looked at his best friend, Peter, with eyes full of sad love and said, "Peter, before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will say you don't even know me 3 times." Peter's heart sank. "No, Lord, never," he cried. But Jesus knew. He also knew that another friend, Judas, had already traded his friendship for 30 pieces of silver. Can you imagine? Even while his friends were failing him, Jesus was still preparing to save them. He took the cup and said, "This is my blood, poured out for you." He was making a promise that no mistake could ever break. In the dark, twisty shadows of the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus fell to his knees. He was in so much pain that his sweat fell like heavy drops of blood onto the dusty ground. He looked up at the stars and prayed, "Father, if there is any other way, please take this cup from me. But, not my will, but yours be done." He was choosing us, over and over again. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. Clank, clank. Glowing orange torches filled the garden. Judas led the soldiers straight to him and pointed him out with a kiss. The disciples ran away in fear, and the King of Peace was led away in chains. By morning, Jesus stood before a man named Pontius Pilate. Pilate looked at Jesus and saw no wrong in him. He washed his hands in a bowl of water and said, "I find no fault in this man." But the crowd was too loud. They shouted and cheered for a prisoner instead of the Prince of Peace. To please the crowd, Pilate handed Jesus over to be punished. While this was happening, Peter watched from a distance, shivering by a small fire. 1, 2, 3 times people asked, "Aren't you with Jesus?" And 3 times, Peter whispered, "I don't know the man." Suddenly, cock-a-doodle-doo, the rooster crowed. Peter caught Jesus's eye across the courtyard and ran away crying bitter tears. By Friday morning, the whole city was shouting, "Crucify him." The same people he had healed were now pointing fingers. They placed a heavy, thorny crown on his head and a splintery cross on his back. Every step up that hill was a step of pure, golden love for you and me. At the top of the hill, as the nails went in, Jesus didn't scream in anger. He looked at the Roman soldiers and prayed, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing." Even there, hanging between 2 thieves, Jesus was still a savior. One thief mocked him, but the other looked at Jesus with faith and said, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus turned his head, even in his pain, and whispered, "Today, you will be with me in paradise." The sky turned as black as a raven's wing. Thunder rumbled like a giant's voice. He looked down at his mother, Mary, and his friend Mary Magdalene, who were weeping at his feet. Even then, he made sure they were cared for. Then, feeling the weight of every bad thing ever done, he cried out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" He felt alone so that we would never have to be. Finally, with a voice like a trumpet of victory, he shouted, "It is finished," and gave up his spirit. The earth shook, and the giant curtain in the temple tore right down the middle. The way to God was open at last. As the sun set, kind friends wrapped Jesus in clean linen and laid him in a cold, silent tomb. They rolled a massive, heavy stone across the door, thud. And the Roman soldiers stood guard. Mary Magdalene stayed nearby, her heart broken, watching the place where they laid her Lord. To the world, it looked like the light had gone out. Peter was hiding, Judas was gone, and the king was dead. But listen closely. Even in the dark, the heartbeat of heaven was getting ready to jump. Because you can't lock love behind a rock. You can't bury the sun. Friday was for the sacrifice. But Sunday, oh, Sunday was for the power.